Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another session with Accent Reality and powered by Accent Radio. I'm your host Adiola, and it's good to have everyone back here again. If you're new, welcome, and if you're a frequent subscriber, viewer, welcome as well. I hope we're all having a wonderful day, and I hope we're all ready to learn, unlearn, and relearn. So today our topic is something not so new and not something that we are not familiar with, but something that you you all know or you have knowledge of already, but just important to bring it back to everyone's knowledge, and then for persons that are oblivious of some of these things, so that you can learn and you can look out for things like this for when purchasing properties, because it's beyond just seeing the property that you want to purchase. It's more about if that property is a good is of good state, it's of good, if it has a good title, and if it's something that you should go ahead with. So today we're going to be talking about types of properties to avoid, and this is going to be a guide for people that intend to purchase properties. So I hope we're all ready to learn. Let's go straight into today's business. So when we talk about properties, we're not only we're not going to be limiting it to only developed properties. We're talking about landed properties to lands as well, and then developed properties. So if you are a potential property owner, you want to purchase property, whether it's land or if it's a developed property, this video is for you, to guide you, and so that you can avoid some kinds of properties. So the list of type of properties that be um, you should avoid buying, list runs on and on. But for the purpose of today, we'll just select a few of this type of properties and discuss. So the first type of property that you should avoid buying are properties without valid title documents. This is something that we talk about. If you are not new to our channel, you would have heard us mention this a couple of times, title documents and what. So but if you are new and you are not aware of what that is, title documents are documents that act as a proof of ownership to a particular property, be it land or developed property. Title documents are what show that this particular person is the original owner of the property, because it will state the name of the person, the description of the property, and most times attached with it is a survey plan, is a registered survey plan. So let's just say your title document is like your ID card, is like your form of identity, but in this aspect we're talking about towards property. So now, why should you run away from a property that, or why should you avoid buying a property that does not have a title document? Because first of all, you cannot ascertain that the person that you are buying that property from is the original owner, is the rightful owner of that property, because like I said, a title document lets you know who is the owner of the property. So if a property that you want to buy doesn't have a title document, then how do we know if the person selling it is actually the real owner or not? So it is advisable to not buy properties without title documents. And then title document comes in various forms. There is the deed of there is the C of O. You can also have your deed of assignment that has been registered, where there is a with the governor's consent approved already on that. And but for some instances, peradventure it's a family land, and family lands are or community land. Family lands or community lands are lands that belong to a family or a community, which they probably inherited it from their fathers or their fathers. um Lands that basically belong to a family and they inherited it, and they've been owners of that particular land for years. Some family lands do not actually have a title document, but there is something that would suffice where they do not have a registered deed of assignment or a CFO, which could be the survey plan. So where there is a survey plan for a family or community land, that could also suffice. So basically, if a land does not have either a CFO, registered deed of assignment, registered survey plan, it is advisable to not go on or go further with acquiring that land or property. And if the person telling you that they sell it says they have title document, then you have the right to actually go ahead and ask for that title document, so that you or your lawyer can run your search on that title document to also ensure that it is valid and that the land is not under any litigation or under any disputes. So that's another point. Now, having title document helps you to run your investigation on that land to know whether the land is free or not. So first thing first, to avoid properties that do not have valid title document. So the second one we'll be discussing now, another type of property that you should avoid is also properties that are on mortgage properties. Before we go into this, let me give a brief explanation of what mortgage is. So mortgage is, I feel everyone understands it, but then let's just give a brief explanation. Mortgage is where a person lends money from another person and puts something as security. So in most like 90% of, or should I just say 80% of mortgage transactions, what the person puts as securities is usually property, land, or a developed property. So in that instance, now that person has put their land, that person that has borrowed money from someone has put his land as security. So in instances like that, it's really not safe to acquire or buy properties that are under mortgage, because what it means is that once that person is unable to pay his debt, the person that he lent the money from and who he has put the land in owed for, who now has a form of, should I say, right of ownership on that land, now can go ahead to sell that property to reclaim his the sum which was borrowed, as well as interest. So in that kind of situation, that puts you, the person that has just acquired that land, at risk, because that property is really not free. So it's advisable that when purchasing property, you should not purchase a property that is mortgage, because you can never know where it leads to, but it's safer to abstain from properties like that. Then the next type of properties that you should avoid are properties that are close to canals or waterways. This is because the law provides a certain a certain distance between property, developed or land, from developed properties from waterways or canals, and this includes drainage as well. So when you see a property that is too close to a canal, waterway, or drainage, basically that property is not in compliance with the law. So for instances like that, those properties are subject to demolition or fine. So it is advisable not to buy properties when you want to buy a property and you see that this property is pretty close to the drainage or the waterway or the canal, even river banks as well, because some of these lands that some lands or properties that are close to river banks, it's obvious that those lands are probably lands that have been sand filled. And then what will happen in a few years time is that any development on that land starts to either sink or it's like leaning towards the side. And when the government realizes that okay, this property is actually on waterways, like I said, those properties are subject to demolition. So it's advisable that when you are going for site inspection, and I should have mentioned this earlier on, when you want to acquire property, you have to ask to see that property to know where it is, because it is only by seeing this property that you're able to ascertain this kind of things and avoid those type of properties. So another type of property that you should also avoid are properties that are within public institutions like university, the airport, or the military base, and basically public institutions, because public institutions or usually government acquired lands, because these lands have been acquired by the government for a particular purpose. And most of these these institutions are usually very big. The space is usually very big, like public universities where the land is quite large, and even airports too, quite large. So when you see a property that is within that area, or so really close to that area, it means that that property is probably on a land that is government acquired. And once you build on government acquired land, it will lead to your property is subject to demolition. So that's another thing you should look out for: properties that are too close or within government within public institutions. Another type of property that you should also look out for and avoid are develop properties without building permits. So in our last two videos, we spoke extensively about building permits and the consequences of not having them, the reason why you should have them, the consequences of not having them, and how to obtain your building permits. So if you intend to apply for a building permit, or you just wish to know more about that, you can watch our last two videos on Law Accent YouTube. So back to what we're discussing today. So another thing, like I said, properties without building permits should be avoided, because your building permits, first of all, let's explain what building permits are. Building permits are approvals given from the relevant authorities, giving you permission to go ahead to make development on a land. So the law states that any person, whether a private individual or a government individual, who wishes to make any development on land has to take permits from the relevant authorities first. And there's a lot of process to go through to obtain these permits, but it is very important that you do that, because these building permits, not only is it good to do that because the law states so, but it's so that when you are planning to build on land, that permit, by the time you submit your permit, your architectural design, and then the authorities carry out soil tests and everything, that would help them to actually see or prove that that structure that you want to put on that, or that you want to develop, is actually safe, and it's not something that in years time would lead to that could possibly collapse or could cause harm to the persons inside or people around. So that's one of the reasons why building permits are important. So if a person, if you're trying to acquire a property, develop property, and the buyer and the seller says he doesn't have a building permit, it's advisable to avoid that, because that would only lead to that property being demolished, or a grievous penalty will be placed on the owner or the occupier of that property. So it's best that you avoid that kind of